what I'm recognizing here is that my talk, I'm calling it Facing the Mirror, and it's really all about wanting to come from a space of being able to look at ourselves really clearly, look ourselves in the eye, and be real and be authentic. And I'm sitting here, you know, I'm also looking, there's also a thing about me that's like, okay, it's not just about facing ourselves in the mirror. We've all been doing so much Zooming that, like right now, I'm looking at you in the camera and I can see my face really big below me. So it's like we're looking ourselves in the mirror and the monitor, we're everywhere. But that capacity to really be real is what I'm wanting to get to today. And as I'm looking at myself on this monitor, it's beautiful, right? It's not, but it's not real. That background is not real. Like here's what's real in the room where I'm sitting right now. If I take this background thing off, let's see, where do I do that? No background. See, okay, that's what's really there, right? A $16 piece of fabric that I bought online 3 weeks ago, and it's all covering up stuff, you know, like, okay, that's what's real. Just to give you a picture, my little puppets back there, those of you who took nonviolent communication know what those are about. You know, we speak from our heart or we speak from our fear. It's just a little model there. I got a big thing of duct tape, right? Does everybody have one of those? Can't get my hands in the right place. A roll of duct tape handy. You know, that's what's real in my life right now. So I'm stripping away the false sort of facade that you were looking at, and just maybe as a symbol for how we might go more deeply in this time of really, when we're really called to know our true authentic selves at a level maybe that we never have before, because that's what's needed right now more than anything else. The love that we have in our hearts, our capacity to be forgiving and open and recognize that there is a wholeness in all people that we have the capacity to bring forth, if we can sort of strip away all of our own stuff that gets on top of that. I was talking this week, those of you who get my e-blast know that I had a really wonderful conversation this week with Pastor Ricky Thomas of the Greater Works of God Church. It's a Black church that had been meeting in our building for a while, and it was just a really good conversation. And we got to talking, and he challenged me about just this thing, about going a little bit more deeply. And he talked about how in his work with his own community and his own congregation, what he's asking people is he'll call up and say, hey, how you doing? Everything okay? And he'll listen to those answers. And, you know, we all have an answer for that. How you doing? And usually it's some form of, especially in unity, it's some form of, it's all good. It's all, but then he asks, okay, so what aren't you telling me? What are you not saying? What's behind that? And it reminded me of a conversation I heard with, you know, Brene Brown has this great new podcast. I'm dropping all sorts of resources for you if you haven't noticed. Brene Brown's new podcast, and she asked, the first question she always asks her guests is, so how are you doing? And what's the real answer, not the BS answer? What's really going on for you? And the answers are invariably some form of, you know, it's complicated. And there aren't very many places in our lives right now where we can really deeply explore like what that complicated is. Like there are some things that are just heartbreaking that have happened over this time. There's a sense of isolation. There's lots of stuff that it's pretty easy for us sometimes in unity to just use our positivity to cover that up. And so in my blog, I talked about how important it is that we not do that we stay engaged, and that we're in the world and not of it. And I talked about what that looks like. That really means being able to come from a place of strength and wholeness, to know our truest nature and be able to express that more fully. That's what being in the world, but not of it looks like. And some of what's in the world right now is kind of messy. So that getting more deeply into what's going on within us is a huge piece of how we can kind of come to a better sense of who we truly are and what we're here to do. But the thing is, we tend to, and it's human nature, right? We tend to run away from that. We tend to push that away. We tend to want to sort of stay up on this level and not really dive down where it's kind of murky. And it reminds me of the story of Jonah. You know, we all know that story, Jonah and the whale, and most of it's about Jonah's in the belly of the whale. But I've been really thinking more about how Jonah shows up, especially in the beginning, right? God has a job for Jonah. He's supposed to go to Nineveh and prophesy to those folks about they need to change their ways, stop the corruption, or they will be smited, right? And Jonah, he's got all sorts of attitude and all sorts of judgments about these people in Nineveh, and he doesn't think they deserve it. He kind of just wants them to be smited. So instead of doing what he's called to, he jumps on a boat that's going in the opposite direction of Nineveh to the very edge of the world. He's running away from it, you know? And I think sometimes some of us have that response or that reaction, you know, rather than really go into those challenging conversations, or rather than really sort of face up to the places in our own hearts that are maybe experiencing some darkness. We run from that. We push it away as far away as we can get, and we just stay on that surface level. So this idea of really being present to the image in the mirror, the image of who we truly are and what we really have to bring, is kind of what we're called to. Now in Jonah's story, he can't run away, right? It eventually catches up with him, which the same is true for us. Like, and I heard Ian Van Zandt talk about this week too on something that she had done. There's another resource for you. Check out Ian Van Zandt. She's got an amazing, I think it's a TV show on OWN network, but you can get it on YouTube too, called Ianla Fix My Life. Bunches of cool stuff about there, about really going more deeply into the stuff that's blocking us from our true selves. So anyway, Ianla had suggested that those feelings that we bury, they don't actually die, they just fester. And that's what Jonah found on this cruise that he was on, right? And he finally threw himself overboard. He's kind of a drama queen, throws himself overboard. And we know the story after that, right? The fish comes along, swallows him. He's in the belly of the whale. And he's doing all his drama in the belly of the whale. Oh, he's not worthy of living. Oh, he wish he would just die. Why doesn't God just... but eventually, he changes his mind, we find. Jonah changes his mind, and he's going to do whatever God tells him to do. So he gets spit up on the beach. Some translations actually use, the translation is actually vomited on the beach, which I think is way better for this drama queen and all that awfulness that Jonah immerses himself in. But he gets spit up on the beach, and he goes and he prophesies to the people of Nineveh. And actually, he must be a pretty good prophet, because he's successful, right? The Ninevites take him for his word. They understand, they change their ways. And so when it's time, Jonah leaves Nineveh and goes up on a hill to watch when the time comes that God has said that he's going to smite them. But because Jonah was so successful in his preaching, Nineveh is not smited. And what we see in Jonah is that he's sitting on this hill still wanting for the Ninevites to have to pay the price, right? He's still holding in his heart this resentment and these judgments and this biases about these people. And what happens to him is that the shade that he had gets baked away, and he ends up sitting there sweltering in his own judgment and his own resentment. And that's how the story ends for Jonah, right? It's not a happy story. But I think it's, in some ways, it's representative of what happens as we are not willing to really look ourselves in the mirror and be really truthful and really courageous about what our full experience is, right? To know that there's a greater dimension behind whatever the turmoil is that we're experiencing, but not to run away from the turmoil, to bring our spiritual power to it so that we can transform it. That's really what I think this life is about. It's really what I think we're being called to now more than ever. Now more than ever. You know, we know in our heads, we know in our minds that all of the isms, racism and homophobia and xenophobia, all of the isms that are about bias, all the isms that are sort of baked into the systemic cultural structure of our world, really, but especially right now of the United States, right? We know all that in our heads that it needs to change. But my sense is there's a space within our hearts that, not that we aren't already sort of loving and have some acceptance, but then can go deeper, right? All of us have the capacity to bring forth a greater degree of love if we're really willing to look and be present to the places where we're not loving now. You know what I'm saying? It's, I think some of it, you know, there are some great writers. I think I've got her book. Oh, I don't have it right by me. White Privilege by Barbara D'Angelo is amazing. And one of the things that she says gets in the way, especially for white people, is that our concept of racism is that people who are racist, they're wearing hoods and they're members of the Klan and they're hateful, right? So racist people are bad. But that concept of racism gets in the way of us being to identify the places where that structural stuff that we're all taught, that we've all been brought up in, is actually affecting how we're showing up and who we're being, and the ways in which we have racist attitudes, right? Because if it's bad people that have those, I'm a good person. So I'm not really willing to see my own role or part and how that's shaping up in my own connections and relationships. So here's an example of how I'm seeing that in my own experience, right? A couple of weeks ago, I was back in Michigan visiting family, and went to, they were having a socially safe distancing kind of gathering with the neighbors, and one of the neighbors was Black. And I, of course, I didn't realize that this is what I was doing at the time, but there was something on my heart. I wanted to share with him this connection that I had, this video that I saw on YouTube that I actually absolutely love. I still think it's a fantastic video. It's this 12-year-old Black kid who's trying to get online to do his homework lessons, and his mom is like, he's restless, and it's just everything about the setting and everything is perfect. It's like this perfect encapsulation of what it is to stay at home in this period, right? And the kid is just, he gets into this pattern, almost like, you know how Baptist preachers have almost this singing way of preaching? He gets into this, only the context of his preaching is just everything that's happening around him in the room. I mean, as a minister, like, that's what I strive for. I want to be able to connect with people in that way and to link our experience together so that this is, by the time he's done, he's like rolling around in the chair and he's dropped the mic and he's laying hands on his mom and anointing. And it's this beautiful kind of joyful expression of this kid who's just been cooped up too long. So I'm telling this story and wanting this guy to know what I realized later is what I'm really wanting to say is I'm one of the cool people. You know, I have friends with Black people. I get Black culture. You know, there was this part of me that was wanting to validate. And that was all about me. That wasn't about really connecting with his experience. That was all about me. And then I also noticed that in my description of that video, I said, oh, this kid, he's so smart. And when I got home and was sort of looking through my feed, another Black friend had posted, and it was nothing to do with what I was speaking to, and he had said, is anybody else just sick and tired of every time a Black person makes some sort of intelligent post, that the first comment from the white people is how articulate and educated they sound? And I realized I was doing the same thing, right? I mean, yeah, it's a compliment, but in some ways it's a backhanded compliment, because the assumption underneath it is that Black people aren't intelligent and smart, right? It's like there's a different level of education and expectation around how a Black person, because we don't say white people were articulate and educated. That's not. So there are these subtle ways in which this notion that white is still supreme is expressing in all of us. At least that's what I experienced in that little bitty piece, right? That's 1 week when I had these two experiences of recognizing that, ooh, that's still a dynamic that's active in my thinking and in my behaving. And unless I'm willing to claim that and be aware of it, I'm never going to be able to change it. So what I would suggest is that's true for all of the isms and the phobias, for homophobia, for xenophobia, for all of that. We have these ideas in our mind, whether they were Black or white or brown. We were brought up with these same ideas. We were educated with those same standards. And they're still sort of being held in our consciousness in ways that we're not always aware of, in ways that we can continue to heal and bring forth greater love. And it's like by healing that man in the mirror, that woman in the mirror, that they in the mirror, that person in the mirror, it's healing that we really begin to be able to stand in a place of strength so that the work we do out in the greater world is authentic and coming from a genuine place. Yeah. So that's one of the reasons that I am so excited that we have John with us here today, because that's what I heard about him, that he comes from that genuine place, right? And he's willing to sort of stand up and give us a context for how, especially in this time when Black Lives Matter is such a necessary and a powerful movement, how Black Lives Matter has really, even in these last, month and a half, that it has become an even more powerful kind of statement for all of us to be standing in a truism. And so John has written this amazing piece and created a cool video that we're going to share with you. And I wanted to give John a chance just to speak to that for a minute. John, is there anything you want to say about how it came to be and what it did in your own heart and how you recruited these other people? Anything you want to share about it? And then if you play the video, we will be blessed.
Excellent, excellent. So I'll give you the shortest version I can. At a time when, in 2015, when Black Lives Matter was prominent and maybe the start of that movement, I'm not sure. The hashtag was being used, and a lot of the responses were all lives matter, and some people were taking that hashtag and sharing it. And I had to search through meditation in myself to deal with what is spirit asking me to see when it comes to this, because I had a lot of feelings about it. I'm married to a wonderful Caucasian, white, however you say it, woman. We have a blended family. We have children who are everything from indigenous to African to Irish to all of these things. And so honestly look at not only African Americans as my family here in the U.S., but I look at the white culture as my family. And as I listen to spirit, I begin to hear there is a part of our family that is hurting and they need focused attention. And we can use our love and bring our love to this quote movement or phrase, Black Lives Matter, without being divisive. In other words, bring that recognition to someone who's saying, hey, I'm hurting and I've hurt myself, sort of like our son. He had an accident one time and hurt himself, and if I came to him, we've heard many analogies, but I like this one because it's personal. Came to my son and he says, Dad, I hurt myself. And I say, you're going to be all right. And then our daughter comes and said, Dad, we're all going to be all right. Just not really the appropriate time. Yes, we are going to be all right. We trust spirit, but he's hurt. So that's kind of how we looked at the Black Lives Matter movement. And then through meditation, this poem came through. This year we heard to go ahead and invite others to actually speak these words and create the video. And so that's what we did. I wanted to share that video. However, I think I will share the link, and then if you don't mind, I'll just play the spoken word piece, share it with everyone. That's all right. So it goes like this. And Kathy, if you wouldn't mind sharing the link, or anyone in the chat room, people can check that out later as well. What if sharing Black Lives Matter was a way to say I love you to the slave?